Faster doesn't always mean better. And I think if you set the expectation of fast, but it's unpredictable, that doesn't land either. I want to know really what sort of time of the day is it coming? When's it going to be here? Have I got some control over that? Does it definitely make its way here next day? And I think the reliability piece probably trumps speed.
You're listening to Retail Disrupted, a podcast that explores the latest industry developments and the trends that will shape how we shop in the future. I'm your host, Natalie Berg. We are diving into the psychology of delivery on today's show. What does a reliable delivery promise actually look like? And how should retailers redesign the checkout to build trust with the customer? My guest today is Morgan Rivers, District Marketing Director at UPS for the UK, Ireland, and the Nordics. Earlier this month, Morgan joined me live on stage at the Delivery Conference, and today I'm excited to share that conversation with you. Traditionally, when we talked about the customer experience, we tended to think of everything that happened before we made the transaction. So is that product in stock? How seamless was the checkout? Did I get good service? Did I get, was it a good value? Today, I think the delivery proposition is very much baked into the customer experience. And that's why, of course, it's so critical that retailers get it right. So I'd love to get your take on this. How have you seen delivery in terms of customer experience? How have you seen that evolve?
I think all of us in this room are consumers and understand that it is really the end-to-end experience. It's great if you have a good online shopping experience, but if the package doesn't arrive when you expect it to, then that actually impacts the retailer, right? So what I've seen evolve over time is, for sure, retailers understand that the carrier selection is absolutely an extension of their customer experience. As much as it pains me to say, the customer doesn't complain necessarily to UPS, it's the retailer directly, or any other carrier that they choose. So really, the extension and the understanding that, that carrier is a reflection of your brand is key. So that, and I think that will continue, right? We're still seeing that rise. We still see that come through. We're seeing more retailers use multi-carrier options as well, right, to service their needs. And so you have to ensure that the communication is good, that you understand your carrier's service and proposition well, so that you can set the scene with your customers and ensure that those expectations are met from end to end.
Yeah. So we're going to come back to what happens when things go wrong, because I think you hit on an important point right off the bat, which is that it is the retailer's reputation. It's their customer loyalty that's on the line. So I want to come back to that in a little bit. But first, let's talk about how delivery is such an emotionally charged moment in e-commerce, because you can have that perfectly seamless experience, get to the checkout, and then suddenly you realize you have a lot to work out, right? And that's when the anxiety can set in for the consumer, because one, there's a lot of options. Mm-hmm. As consumers, we are spoiled for choice today, not only when it comes to, shopping and the touch points that we have, but also on the delivery and fulfillment side. And I think the other reason that anxiety sets in is because things can go wrong. Missed deliveries, extra costs that maybe a consumer wasn't expecting, shipping delays, maybe some friction around returns. So I guess my question to you, Morgan, is to what extent should we be thinking about delivery as a trust moment rather than just a logistical one?
We see 50% of cart abandonment rate because of the confusion at that end. You don't take the payment that I want to pay with, you don't have the service option that I want to do, you don't manage returns appropriately, or I'm just confused, right? It's not clear. I think we make expectations of the purchaser that they understand what a service means, or where it can be. If it doesn't fit into them and they're losing control, right? They're trusting you and they want to control some of those elements. If they can't control them and they don't understand the service offerings, or you don't take the payments on there, then that's going to lead to that cart abandonment. And that's a real challenge, right? I mean, you don't want somebody to have gone through the process of selecting the products, nearly making the purchase, and just because they don't understand or you can't support them in a way that they want, that you abandon that cart. So it's really about expanding that choice, whether that be payment terms, deliveries, etc. There has to be the options that those people want.
And is that the point at which most consumers do abandon their carts, when they get to delivery and they're met with something unexpected?
Yeah, I mean, customers will get to about, I think it's about 40% of abandonment from carts is because they don't have the delivery, or there's an unexpected delivery charge, or it's too slow, or it's too fast, or, you know, wherever it may be. It's that lack of options and choice or clarity.
So you talked about fast delivery. I think as consumers, we expect delivery today to be fast and free. We know it's not actually free, but that's a whole other topic. Those to me feel like baseline expectations, but there is also an element of predictability trumping speed. And I think that's something that maybe we don't talk about enough, just that reliability, knowing that the order is going to turn up on our doorstep at the time that it said it was going to. So I'd love to get your take on customer expectations more generally, and that kind of customer preference for speed versus predictability.
Everything's next day, same day in some cases. What we've seen, and you see this as well when the economy is a little bit tougher and people are making more economical choices, is that people are willing to have, you know, predictability and a slower service if it meets the cost and the expectation that they have in their mind. So, you know, we have seen a bit of a shift away from next day to more standard 1 day plus services in the carrier space. And that is because there's not only the cost saving expectation, but it sort of allows them to have that choice in there as well. So yeah, that is going to be key. It's not always express. Faster doesn't always mean better. And I think if you set the expectation of fast, but it's unpredictable, that doesn't land either, right? So, you know, if I want to know really what sort of time of the day is it coming? When's it going to be here? What's, you know, have I got some control over that? Does it definitely make its way here next day? And I think the reliability piece is probably trump speed.
Yeah, it's interesting too, isn't it, when you look at grocery versus non-food. And, you know, in grocery, just today we heard that Sainsbury's is taking its Chop Chop app and they're integrating it into their main app. We also heard Amazon launching Amazon Now. So I feel that quick commerce is very much here to stay. And I think our expectations for fast are just going to continue to evolve. But at the same time, you know, there are customer concerns around sustainability. And there's, you know, with sustainability, it's complicated because there's the whole say-do gap where everybody says they want sustainability, but will they actually accept slower green delivery? So it's complicated and it's nuanced. But I guess, you know, from a consumer's perspective, how do you see this kind of almost contradictory need where, yes, we want fast, but also if it's not reliable, well, that's just going to impact the retailer and their reputation, isn't it?
Yeah, and it goes back to this choice piece, right?
Yeah.
People want the ability to choose. There should be a fast option available, but there should also be a standard. Not all of those should be included. You know, this is where you have the ability to, if we're going to offer a faster service, maybe that's a supplement to that, right? So you create the value in your more standard operation, and then you have a way to upgrade. The same way that we just don't have delivery to door, right? We have to have this accessibility. You know, if you work nights and you only find out on the day, hey, your package is going to be delivered between 10 and 11. Well, hey, boy, I only went to bed at 7 this morning and I'm asleep. You want to have the ability to reroute or have it somewhere so it's delivered safe. Because now I can't sleep because, you know, porch piracy is on the rise, right? So how do we make sure that we're giving customers choice? Also that convenience of safety as well, you know. So it's lots of elements, but I think it is that having very clear choices. Might not be something that you build out straight away. You might have one and then choose to add them dependent on what people are asking for. But I think, you know, we're all consumers here. We know we might make different choices. If you've forgotten someone's birthday, you might be like, hey, I need that next day. Whereas if you're a little bit more organised, you'd be like, hey, actually, I'll take the slower option. I know I'm going to be at home that day. That's much more simple. If you're somebody that's worried about oh, I'm not going to be around. Then the out of home works, and then you pick it up at a time that's convenient for you. So I think they're things that you can add on and build. And the out of home, for sure, that will also support the sustainability piece as well, because if we can deliver into singular locations and people are doing that on their natural walk home, then that kind of addresses that piece. It's difficult to get away from. Deliveries to door are always going to drive some emissions, right? And they're not exactly the most sustainable way to do it, but are there more sustainable ways to go? Yes, for sure. And that's about getting the consolidation and reducing the mileage.
Yeah, I'd like to hone in on out of home, because if we look specifically at click and collect, there's been a huge growth in lockers, for example. So I'd love to get your take on, where you see that going and whether you think retailers will try to divert shoppers towards those more profitable, more sustainable ways of getting their goods. 3
in 5 people have used a locker. Right, so predominantly through returns right now. In the UK specifically, it's a challenge, right? Sort of, it was the 3rd largest e-commerce market, really ahead of its time. Home delivery kind of became standard, right? And it's really difficult to get people out of that way of thinking and divert them out. But you come to some of the other markets that I look after, like Sweden or Finland, that's absolutely the expectation, right? If you don't have lockers, people aren't purchasing from you, right? So the fact that we're starting to see this more through returns and people use them, I think you'll get activation through usage. And so the more that we expose people to the lockers, the more available that they become, and the more multi-carrier they become as well, right? Because you don't want to be going to different locker banks for things. I think that will sort of increase the adoption. So I think it will only increase over time.
Yeah, it is interesting, because something I always say is that convenience is defined by the individual, right? And to your point, the same customer might want different things in different moments. So it is just about offering that choice. Now, you touched on international, and that's a really nice segue to the next part of the conversation, because I always think it's so fascinating when you look at other markets and how, even if you just compare like the UK to France, and how you take into account things like population density, and you've got the big drive concept with the hypermarkets, because that works in a market like France, whereas in the UK, it's not going to work as well. So, and then there's also things like cultural attitudes towards time. How important is speed in different markets? Payments as well. So I'd love to get your take, if you could talk us through some of the differences that you've observed internationally.
Yeah, and this is key for retailers. So you'll find some natural organic growth coming from other countries. And in your mind, you think, yeah, that's super easy, I'll do that. But as you said, there are these cultural norms that are different. In France, for example, as you mentioned, there's some areas that are so remote and have very little population density, and actually some deliveries in certain locations don't go directly to the homes. They go into a central local store, and they will be maybe collected once or twice a week, right?
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, there are some areas like that. Like I say, in Poland, in Finland, in Sweden, in Denmark's a little bit different. That's more stores, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to go into a man's store, and that will work. Lockers in some of the other locations. So I think that's the key. The international, bar the tariffs and all the other things aside, it's really just to the basics. Before we even get to the complex piece, it's actually, just because this is the way that we like it, and I'm thinking like a consumer in the UK, the social norms are very different in the other markets, and it's really getting in and understanding that. But what's great now is there's so many studies that kind of tell you. So if you're a retailer and you want to get in, or you're talking to your carriers or whatever it is, there's people that will tell you you don't have to be an expert in all of these spaces, right? There's been enough research done on your behalf. But there are some very key differences within the markets that will require a different set of delivery options or options on your website.
Yeah, so one size doesn't fit all.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. What are some of the common mistakes that you see retailers make when they look to localize their delivery proposition?
It is that they're like, well, I have this here in the UK maybe, I'm going to just go out into another market. Well, actually there's different carriers, different expectations, different payment types, different services. And then not just that, is you're really affecting your customer experience if you haven't thought ahead. So, effectively the UK, everywhere we export to now, there's going to be import charges on the other side. So within your retail platform, are you really thinking about customer experience to the point of, well, they've paid for it, I've shipped it, it's done? Well, then it gets to the other side now, and there's government charges that have been levied, and now I'm frustrated as a consumer because nobody told me what they were or even gave me a proxy of what that was. So I think when we start to think about international consumers, if you're based in alternate markets, is there something that I can add to my platform to give me that calculated landed cost when I get to the other side? Because there's nothing worse than, again, it's that I don't want the surprise. I don't, it's
that clarity, isn't it?
Yeah, that clarity, absolutely. So, is there a way we can demonstrate, with what this person's bought, what will the landed cost be? In fact, can they pay for that up front so that the delivery is smooth on the other side, right? So there's lots of things as a retailer. Going into markets isn't as straightforward as you think. Not only because the options they expect are different, the delivery and the transit times will be different, but also now because there's going to be additional charges, and where is it you account for that within the process?
Yeah, it's a lot of complexity for retailers. I wonder if there's anything that UK retailers can learn, excuse me, can learn from international markets. Is there anything that you've seen in, say, the Nordics that you think that's really innovative, that's a really great way of doing this?
In the Nordics in particular, all of the markets are slightly different. I guess that's one of the challenges that I come across all the time, is just because they're in a cluster of countries, they're very unique countries individually, and I think that's it. But the way that they embrace sort of the sustainability focus, the lockers, the out-of-home deliveries, that's sort of been key. And what we're trying to work out is, what's driving it? How can we get the adoption that they've had in these countries, and sort of bring that to the UK? What's the density of the lockers? How available are they? Are there any differences to ease of use? And are we able to sort of bring that here? But yeah, there's continuous innovations.
So let's talk about what happens when things go wrong, because the last mile in particular is not easy, and things do inevitably go wrong. What is the best way to resolve this? So I guess my question is, what do you think customers value most when things go wrong? Is it about being transparent and putting your hands up and saying, mea culpa, really sorry, this has gone wrong, here's what we can do for you? Is it about speed of resolution? What is it that consumers look for in that moment?
Yeah. It is that transparency, and ultimately they don't care who's going to fix the issue. So if they've bought something from a retailer's website, the consumer says that's your problem. And if you push them to the carrier, they'll be like, but I didn't buy it, you chose the carrier, this is how it goes. So they want that clarity of, how are you going to resolve it? I think people accept that things go wrong, and it's all in how you fix it, right? So transparency, one, something's gone wrong. Two, I'm going to own the issue, and this is what we're going to do to fix it. And then three, it's the follow-up on how you're going to do that. Things do go wrong. It could be stuck in customs for a reason. It could actually be that somebody in the warehouse didn't stick the right label on. Lots of things can go wrong through the supply chain process. But it's all about the transparency, the communication, and then the follow-up.
So earlier we talked about the complexity because of all of this choice. And we know that sometimes too much choice can actually lead to decision fatigue or choice paralysis. We've seen it on the supermarket shelves that when grocers rationalize the number of products that they're selling, sales actually go up, which feels very counterintuitive. Is that the same for delivery? Is it, how can brands prioritize choice without overwhelming customers?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, look, there's an abundance of carriers in most markets, and if you decide that you're going to apply them all to your checkout, you're really asking the consumer to do a lot of work in understanding something that, quite frankly, isn't a huge interest to them. And that's why when I said earlier, it's really about those three choices, right? It's really about, let's have an express choice, let's have a standard more slower choice or an economy choice, and then let's have an out of home. That kind of covers everything. And then that's up to the retailer to prioritise who suits the needs for those better. Is there a better one for certain lane pairings, if it's into Europe versus a local domestic shipment. So I think three choices is probably enough, unless there's a need and you can see something else. But yeah, don't expect your customer to have a look at 10 different options for service and think they're going to make the choice, right? It's just too much work that you're asking them to do. they'll be fatigued. They're excited because they made their purchase, and now you're making it complicated for them. And that's going to lead to that cart abandonment on the other side, which we definitely don't want.
Yeah, great. So looking ahead, online shopping is evolving so rapidly. I think it's a really exciting time.
Yeah.
I keep saying retailers need to be thinking about how they sell to AI bots as well as how they sell to humans, and how are AI bots going to, what options will they choose if they're faced with 10 different delivery choices. So lots of interesting things. I think AI is powering this next wave of e-commerce adoption. So really excited to see, especially, how is it going to propel categories like food and fashion that have been slow to move online. At the same time, we said earlier, quick commerce is accelerating.
Yep.
We've seen the rise of resale. We've seen the rise of the likes of Temu and Shein, who've shown us that actually consumers will accept slow delivery in exchange for very low prices. And then we touched on sustainability. So lots of moving parts, lots of complexity. How do you see delivery expectations evolving in the future?
I don't think the choices will evolve as much. There might be a bit more out of home, there might be a bit more express, it will mix between the two. But I think really it's how can we use AI to reduce returns, I know there's some things out there already, but can we have some real live, this is how this will fit you based upon AI, this is how it will really look. So when I get it, oh yeah, it actually fits as I expected. Now I don't need to return it, right? Can we use AI to reduce returns, which kind of also addresses some of the sustainability issues. I mean, AI is within the delivery companies as well already, so people are using it to sort. But I think for retailers, it's how can we use it to continue to improve the customer experience, as we're doing now. Here's a suggested item, but maybe that's a little bit broader, maybe we use AI to scan multiple retailers and say, hey, based upon what you like, this is how it is. Is there a way to consolidate that and then bring it to the consumer? I think it's never ending, the options of what AI can do, but I think it's really, can we use it to focus on a way to continue to really improve that customer experience, increase sales through this predictive purchasing, and also can we leverage it for the sustainability bit on the reducing returns, because that's what's going to continue to help evolve and make it more manageable for retailers too.
Yeah, and that's such a huge piece. I mean, if anyone's able to crack that, you're going to unlock a lot of opportunities, better customer experience, better for the retailer's bottom line, and better for the environment as well. What advice do you have for the retailers that are in the room today? What's one thing that they can be doing when they're rethinking their own delivery strategies?
Just one?
You can go more than one. We have 19 minutes, so.
well, I think I've mentioned it. It's keep it simple, but allow your customers to choose. Allow them to feel like they've got that control and autonomy in that delivery process. I think if they feel involved, then that will support going forward. So I've touched a little bit briefly on the complexity of international. We shouldn't be scared of it. There's lots of tool solutions and other companies that can help make that a lot simpler. And I think that if you allow some other people to come in and share their expertise with you, you can really grow internationally, and that's how you're going to sort of really double down on that growth spectrum, right? So don't limit yourself to the UK. Think about a broader market, but leverage the expertise of the carriers, the tech providers, and all of these tools that can be integrated into your platforms to really make sure that your customer experience is seamless from end to end.
Thank you for listening to Retail Disrupted. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the podcast, please leave a rating or review, or share it with others. It really makes a difference.